So as a farmer's son, I addressed the Future of English Farming debate on Sunday afternoon here at the conference in Manchester. And we were, of course, talking about some of the supply chain difficulties which we are experiencing. My contribution to that debate was basically saying that the current issues that we are seeing in the very centralised supply chain actually could be dealt with, and we could see future solutions if they are more localised. So what we see today, particularly from the supermarkets, is a very heavily centralised supply chain. I use milk as the best example. Milk travels from farms to dairies. It then goes to distribution plants and then travels probably back to the places where it originated, having a huge number of miles associated with that. And of course the HGV network, if you like, we know is under pressure at the moment. And of course there's more reasons for that as well. When you have large commercial organisations that choose to prioritise profit over resilience, and when they pay HGV drivers really poor wages, we are going to see these issues. So my point in the Fringe event here at the conference earlier this week was to say, actually, the centralised systems that we have today, which are perpetuated through profit-driven decisions from large supermarkets, are clearly not working. It is an opportunity for us to have a more diverse range of supply chain options, which is much more local, where we can see a shorter supply chain from, in this case, the farmer to the shop, and therefore be more environmentally friendly and cheaper for the consumer, as we're already starting to see.
Chris, it sounds simple the way you describe it. It's more complicated than that, isn't it? In the sense that those longer supply chains aren't always just about eking out profit margins. Sometimes there are bureaucratic hurdles that only a bigger organisation can surmount. So, for instance, my friend, the dairy farmer, I was talking to at the weekend.
What sort of?
Hang on, let me finish. You know, my friend, the dairy farmer, knows that he can't afford to pasteurise the milk locally, so it gets sent off. The pig farmer I was talking to last night was lamenting, rightly, I understand why, the fact that it's very hard to find people to work in slaughterhouses and abattoirs now. And back in the day, 20 years ago, before foot and mouth, it was all done quite locally. But now health and safety means that it has to be amalgamated and done at central abattoirs. My point is, it's not just about money. Sometimes it's about safety, particularly where food's concerned.
And that's why supermarkets like Tesco's have in excess of £700 million profit this year alone. I'm afraid that we've just got to be quite clear on what I'm suggesting here. I'm not suggesting that farmers pasteurise their own milk. What I'm saying that we're experiencing is a failure of a very supermarket-driven, centralised supply chain that basically is very commercial, very predatory from what I've seen. And I remember I speak as a farmer's son who's experienced a lot of these difficulties from neighbouring farms and friends who I've seen firsthand. That system has broken down. Now, I'm not saying that a farmer should pasteurise his own milk and then send them to the local shop down the road. What I'm saying is there needs to be a much more localised supply chain focus that will be much more resilient. And I think, as we're already starting to see, I'm the MP for West Dorset, we have a number of farms now where they are deciding to supply milk directly to shops or local supermarkets, independent supermarkets, I should say, and the milk is cheaper. So also the argument that often comes from the left that says actually that's more expensive, people will not always be able to afford it, I'm afraid does not wash. You can go into a local supermarket in my constituency where you will pay 75p for a litre of milk compared to £1.15 in the supermarket chain. And this perpetuates the issue that we see today, that these commercial supermarkets, these predatory supermarkets, are screwing small farmers. They are screwing HGV drivers right down in terms of pay, and therefore we are starting to see this issue. So all I'm saying from a policy perspective is that we should look at more local and more resilient supply chains, because they will work better, because the centralised ones don't work, as we can see, under pressure.
They're not here to answer that charge, are they, that they are predatory? I mean, they clearly are hugely competitive We have a grocers sector which is, in some respects, the envy of the world. In some respects, not. Of course they're commercial. How could we expect them not to be anything other than commercial? Of course they're commercial. And I suppose the argument runs, setting aside the argument, the well-ventilated argument about dairy farmers, there will be lots of people who will say, actually, what our supermarkets have done, apart from creating tens and tens of thousands of jobs, is also to make sure we have some of the lowest grocery bills in Europe. And unfortunately, sometimes the collateral damage is family farms who, just simply do not have the collective ability to bargain with some of these supermarkets.
And I'm saying that's not acceptable to me in the rural constituency. I do not buy the fact that supermarkets such as Tesco can make such considerable profits and drive prices right down, and then we still find ourselves in this situation. So take Sainsbury's, a brilliant example. Take Sainsbury's. I have farmers in my constituency that supply milk to Sainsbury's. They have had their milk contracts threatened by Sainsbury's unless they sell a proportion of their cattle to that supermarket. Now that is fundamentally outrageous. It is a terrible, terrible abuse of market power. And what I'm saying is we see this across the board from supermarkets, and it's time to call it out. Now I know you make some points about economies of scale for the supply chain, but what I'm saying to you is where we are screwing down on these, where supermarkets are screwing down on these things, it is for the profit, invariably, of parent groups, not necessarily the specific supermarkets, at the expense of local farmers and HGV drivers. Because let's face it, the HGV drivers have a pretty rough ride of it, with very poor facilities and poor pay as well.
And it's something we've drawn our viewers' attention to on a number of occasions.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.